There's a hotel in China called the Chilbosan. It's in one of the country's biggest cities, Shenyang, in the northeast. From the outside, it just looks like your classic Asian business establishment, complete with a couple of stone tigers flanking the front door.
I've seen the reviews and the photos, and they're not bad. The hotel is centrally located, and the rooms are bright and clean.
Free Wi-Fi, it's got a minibar. Overall, pretty reasonable option for, say, an American businessman who needs a place for the night. Like this man we're calling Mark. He's operated for years in China, where talking to the foreign press is frowned upon, so he's asked us not to use his real name.
During one of his business trips to China, Mark ends up in Shenyang for a few meetings. He's had a long day. A Chinese colleague has booked him into a hotel for the night, the Chilbosan Hotel.
It was a beautiful lobby, and all the staff was, dressed well, very attentive to, the people's needs coming in to check in.
But as he checks in, he can't help but notice some furtive glances from the staff, and it gets even worse when he steps into the elevator.
And we stopped on a kind of an intermediate floor. The door opened. Some of the other hotel visitors kind of looked very surprised. Wow, who's this guy? Kind of, taking a step back, literally, and looked at me completely shocked. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. They got in the elevator and they kind of separated themselves a little bit off to the side, but it was just dead silence.
At this point, Mark starts to get nervous and takes out his phone to do a bit of research on this Chilbosan Hotel.
There was some comment that this was involved in some of the hackings at Sony. I know there was some tension between the US and North Korea around that whole incident. And that's when I discovered that this was known as the Hacker Hotel.
He may be in China, but Mark has ended up in a hotel run by North Koreans. I guess he didn't notice the name written in Korean outside, but Chilbosan is distinctly North Korean. The name means Mountain of Seven Treasures. That is one of North Korea's most famous scenic sites.
So it's a nice mystical name, but this hotel hides a dark secret, at least according to intelligence agencies. They say this is where the Lazarus Group, North Korea's elite hacking unit, or at least some of its members, carried out some of their cyber attacks, hence the nickname, the Hackers Hotel.
All of which Mark is finding out as he scrolls through his smartphone. He's starting to get concerned, and he makes a call to a colleague who's booked his room. The colleague says not to worry, it's just one night, and it's already late.
Having people stand around while you're eating, there's a point of being looked after a little too much while you're eating. So you don't feel you've got your space to actually enjoy your meal and relax. And that was a little bit the way I felt during that particular meal.
I know what he's talking about. North Korean waitresses used to hover over me at meals. They'd even straighten my chopsticks for me after I put them down. It can be claustrophobic.
I would absolutely hate that. And there's something else that's making it hard for Mark to relax. On the wall behind him is a TV set showing a video of the Korean War.
And very patriotic in nature, and they're showing U.S. tanks being, shot at. I asked her, what's this all about? And I said, well, what they're saying there on the screen is how the North Koreans effectively won against the U.S. And that was just a very unusual situation.
It's so interesting that he was getting North Korean state TV at the Chilbosan, but I think we should just get something straight here. North Korea did not win the Korean War against the U.S. The two sides called a truce in 1953.
After that uncomfortable dinner, Mark decides to head for bed, but not before taking a few precautions, like switching off the Wi-Fi on his phone. But he still gives the hotel a 4-star review, because
the rate was very reasonable. It was about $50 US, which is literally half the rate of probably any comparable hotel.
Investigators say the Chilbosan wasn't just a cheap hotel for visiting businessmen like Mark, and that North Korean-run outposts like these also serve as training grounds for transforming some of the country's most brilliant mathematical minds into computer hackers.
Pak Jin-hyok, the man wanted by the FBI for the Sony hack and the Bangladesh bank heist, is believed to have operated from one of these North Korean operations in China.
North Korea strictly controls its citizens' access to the outside world. Most people can't even phone someone in another country. And yet, here they are, sending some of their most talented people into the world. Why? From the BBC World Service, this is The Lazarus Heist.
I'm Jeff White.
I'm Jean Lee.
Episode 6, Cyber Slaves. It's 2010, and in Pyongyang, North Korea, the beginning of a new academic semester. And from his home in the capital, Gum-hyuk Kim, he's the young man we met in the previous episode, is getting ready to leave for Beijing. He's going to study Chinese as an exchange student. It's his first time travelling abroad alone. It was his dad's idea.
He always said you have to go outside and see around the world what is different.
It's the kind of advice many parents in the West might give their children, but highly unusual in North Korea, where most people can't even leave their hometowns without permission, much less travel abroad.
But Gum-hyuk belongs to a different class. He says he was born into the elite, the grandson of a war hero who fought alongside the founder of North Korea against the Japanese.
And the heir apparent Kim Jong-un, the young leader who studied in Switzerland as a teenager, wants to raise a generation of elites, his future power base, to be worldly and sophisticated. We start to see a new slogan in Pyongyang around this time: keep your feet firmly planted on your land and look out over the world, which seems to hint at a new openness to the outside world.
So Gum-hyuk is among a wave of North Korean students sent overseas. He takes a plane for the first time, eager to discover the world. And as soon as he and his fellow students hit Beijing, where do they go first? Where do you think?
Yeah, McDonald's.
McDonald's. Not even the North Koreans can resist the golden arches.
We ate McDonald's at the first time in our life. We didn't know how to order and then how to eat. We just look around, look others, and just follow what they did,
And suddenly, he and his friends become very self-conscious about these loyalty badges they're still wearing on their blazers. They realize that no one else in China is wearing pins like these, and that these red badges of the Kims immediately identify them as North Koreans.
After 5 minutes, no one had the badge in their chest.
They took it off.
Yes, we noticed that this is weird. We have laptops and we have desktop computers and we have house. We don't need to wear North Korean jacket when we go to school. So we feel free.
Free. To take off their suits and ties, surf the internet, to watch movies, to go shopping, and even to meet foreigners.
South Koreans and Japanese and Americans. I surprised I could meet South Koreans. And they surprised they could meet North Korean alive.
That's a level of freedom they just don't have in Pyongyang. North and South Koreans rarely ever get the chance to meet. So Chinese campus is one place where they can have these candid encounters.
But most North Koreans don't have complete freedom when they're abroad. Even elites like Gum-hyuk are required to turn up at the North Korean embassy on Saturdays for ideology seminars. These are study sessions where propaganda is drilled into them. And these meetings also serve as self-criticism sessions, where they're required to report on any infractions or violations of North Korean rules, or confess their failure to meet the state's expectations.
In that meeting, we have to report what we did last week.
And were you honest?
No, absolutely not. I told my friend, I'm going to talk about you. And then she said, that's okay, no problem. And then I said something bad about my friend, but he didn't care about that. Yeah, there was a deal, yeah.
Gum-hyuk and his friend find a way to deal with these sessions by agreeing beforehand on their confessionals. They're going to keep very quiet about taking off their loyalty pins and about those chats with friendly South Koreans. I've seen my own North Korean staff negotiate in advance on their confessions as well, but these sessions are not a joke. I've been in sessions like these, and they are intimidating, humiliating, and designed to break your spirit.
In one of these Saturday ideology seminars, Gum-hyuk notices a group of students who seem a little different. They're older, they're closely monitored. He's told they only get to go out in pairs.
They didn't seem the students. They seemed like 25 or 26 years old. When we was 20, they went to university and they study Chinese in the morning, and in afternoon when they get back their house, they use their computer.
Eventually, he becomes friends with one of them.
He helped me to buy a computer in a market, and then he helped me to install Windows at the time. And then I bought dinner, and then we got close. He said he was hacker, but I didn't know what hacker is, so okay, hacker is a job.
Okay, hacker is a job. That's just extraordinary.
And then he told me what he did, and then what they stole. Most of what they did is they create a fake game ID and stole money in South Korea. That made money.
There have been news reports about this. North Korean hackers accused of breaking into computer games companies in the south, artificially building up credits within the games, then selling these credits to other players for cash, which of course then goes back to Pyongyang.
And like all North Korean workers, Kum-hyuk's friend would have been under pressure to meet certain quotas with his earnings.
They have their own task, how much money they have to own in a year.
Like a quota.
Yes, exactly. $10,000 a year. Every person.
Kum-hyuk says their lives were
Completely controlled by the government. And then the government paid them all.
Paid their expenses.
Yes.
And do you think they have a choice?
They didn't have any choice. They are cyber slaves.
cyber slaves, young men brought to China on student visas and the lure of a taste of life overseas, but kept on a tight leash in order to work through the night to make money for their country.
Kum-hyuk went abroad to learn about other countries, but he's also learning about his own. He learns about these cyber slaves for a start, and from talking to people and searching the internet, he discovers some very uncomfortable truths about his homeland.
I was so shocked and I was so frustrated because I wanted to find some words to defend my country, but, I couldn't find.
And so 2 years after arriving in China, Kum-hyuk makes up his mind to defect.
The cyber warriors living in China would have been exposed to the same ideas, though. Why does the regime risk putting temptation in their way by sending them to places like the Chilbosan Hotel? And why don't they then slip away from their minders and try and defect once they're there? What hold has the regime got over them? So I'm looking at the FBI's Cyber's Most Wanted list on their website, and it's like a journey into my sort of journalistic past. There's Evgeny Bogachev. He's the guy the FBI say invented the Zeus virus that hacked into banks. That's Alexei Belan, who they say hacked into about 500 million Yahoo accounts. I think a lot of people have a sort of cliched image of what hackers look like. It's young lads in hoodies, in their bedrooms. But looking down this page, that's not the impression you get. There's about 100 guys here, and yes, they are all blokes. And some of them are in military uniform, some of them middle-aged. These are, according to the FBI, certainly the professional hackers.
The picture your eye is naturally drawn to is the one right in the middle of the top row, Park Jin-hyuk. He's the only one with a blue background, and he seems to be looking straight at you. He's the man the FBI accuses of being a member of the Lazarus Group, the infamous hacking ring, suspected in a string of devastating cyber attacks.
Not that you could tell any of that from his picture, or even if you bumped into him in the street. He just looks perfectly ordinary, run-of-the-mill. And of course, that's deliberate.
It turns out Park Jin-hyuk was leading a double life in China. By day, he had a respectable job.
As a software developer for a North Korean company called Chosun Expo, working on above-the-board legit IT projects for paying clients around the world. These projects were things like lottery websites and e-commerce programs. The FBI says the profits went back to North Korea.
And this was happening in the busy Chinese port city of Dalian. Hyun-Sun Lee was born in Pyongyang, but he spent years studying and working in Dalian, where his father was a high-level North Korean business official. This family was very well connected, and Hyun recalls that back in Dalian,
there were more than 60 IT programmers. I saw them a few times. I went to their apartment to learn computer, and about 20 people living together in one space. So 4 to 6 people living one room, and then the living room, they made it as like office. So all the computers are on in the living room.
All working around the clock to make money.
They are making like the cell phone games at the time. They told me that they were selling this product to Japan and South Korea through brokers. They made about $1 million a year, just 20 people.
Perhaps this is how Park Jin-hyuk's own career began. We know from the CV, the resume, the FBI found that he began working in China as an online games developer. Of course, the work these IT programmers are carrying out isn't criminal per se.
but if they're still operating from Dalian today, they would be violating UN sanctions. Sanctions that are designed to stop North Korea from making money overseas that could go back into the nuclear program.
Some of Park Jin-hyuk's lawful clients knew they were employing a North Korean programmer, but not all of them. Accessing the internet from computers in China rather than in North Korea provides useful cover. the same way that clothes that are branded made in China can turn out to actually have been made by North Koreans based in China.
And to that extent, North Korea's cyber warriors are not that different from the thousands of workers the regime sends abroad to make money, to build a soccer stadium in Dubai, to log wood in Siberia, or to serenade our American businessmen at the Chilbosan. Exporting people has been a lucrative way for the regime to get around financial sanctions.
But let's be clear, Jean, this isn't exactly a luxurious expat lifestyle, is it?
Far from it. To start with, the majority of what they earn goes straight into the regime's coffers, and then most of them live in cramped conditions, sharing, as we've heard, apartments, hotel rooms, of course, with more freedoms than back home, like growing a beard if they want, which is a huge no-no back in North Korea.
For the hackers, this makes a lot of sense. The North Korean regime's making the most of its highly gifted and skilled computer engineers, and getting them to generate as much money as possible, lawfully or unlawfully, doesn't matter. That's the country capitalising on its investment in these guys.
It's a methodology that we've seen employed kind of time and time again, where you send hackers abroad to work for ostensibly this kind of front company, and then they use the infrastructure of that front company to conduct the cyber operations themselves.
That's Priscilla Moriuchi. She's a cyber expert and a fellow at Harvard who used to work for the U.S. National Intelligence Agency. She spent years tracking North Korea's cyber operations and researching how its hackers operate overseas.
They live, amongst each other, relatively secluded lives, but their jobs are to integrate into internet society and culture and to figure out how they can utilize it, whether it be from internet gaming, internet casinos, or the SWIFT interbanking system, how those can be utilized, how they can be exploited to generate revenue for the state.
But hang on, they couldn't have figured all that out from inside North Korea. Because as you heard in our previous episode, only a tiny minority of the country there has internet access.
So North Korea has to dispatch its hackers to a freer society than its own. And while China's internet isn't exactly without restriction, it's still open enough to give them a window onto the world. And they learn quickly.
What's really struck out to me as I've done my research is that the North Koreans are really on the leading edge and they're quite adaptable. They have a better understanding of our technology and our culture and our society than they ever really get credit for.
Take the Sony Pictures hack. Remember how the Lazarus hackers tried to trick their targets into downloading malware by promising nude photos of celebrities.
That's what really struck me, was the leak of Sony stuff came off the back of other leaks of sort of, salacious pictures of Hollywood stars. And there was a whole sort of tactic, it seemed to me, of almost capitalising on that and saying, look, here's more fresh information and more nude pictures of stars. It seemed like the people who did the Sony attack and leaked the information had their finger on the pulse.
Yeah, so the leaks, demonstrated a understanding of American popular culture and the news cycle that we hadn't really attributed to North Korean, especially cyber operators before, about what would make news, right, in the United States. And what would make news were embarrassing personal emails, right, back and forth between executives, at a movie studio and celebrities. And that was quite an adept move on their part.
And then with the Bangladesh bank heist, they went from getting their heads around American pop culture to mastering the intricacies of the international financial system.
It took about 18 months of research into the network of that bank itself, into understanding the SWIFT interbank transfer system, to the extent where North Korean operators could actually install their own update to the SWIFT system to disable some of the security protocols. Right? That's a very deep knowledge of a program that relatively few people really know that much about.
So by sending its hackers to work from China, the regime is achieving a lot. It's making it harder to attribute cyber attacks back to Pyongyang. It's creating new opportunities for making money while evading sanctions. And it's providing a training ground for hackers to learn how the rest of us live and how we use the internet to socialize, to network, and to bank.
But to do all this, they need to make sure they stay under the radar to avoid getting caught. And as any criminal will tell you, the best way to avoid detection is for as few people as possible to be in on the plan.
In the late 1990s, Jang Se-yul, says he was among the first to join a newly formed army unit in North Korea dedicated to cyber. He says his role was to run war simulations in Pyongyang, but that others were sent abroad to carry out cyber attacks. And this was under the command of the RGB, the Reconnaissance General Bureau. That's the North Korean equivalent of the CIA. Jung has the bespectacled look of the math professor he once was. He defected from North Korea in 2008, but he says he's managed to stay in contact with some of his former colleagues. And what he's learned is that
the North Korean overseas spy and intelligence agencies are very powerful, and they can give their own soldiers secret identities that no one else will know about. So when a cyber warrior visits other countries, first they change their names and are given false occupations. And this is what you will find in the company records. And this is also what will be written on their passports.
So, Gene, time to talk about something we've been thinking about for a little while. Park Jin-hyuk, this man we've been talking about, that might not be his real name, right?
exactly. In their indictment, the FBI mentions a few aliases. And while Park Jin-hyuk is the name he used on his resume and for the company he was working for, it's certainly possible it isn't the one he was born with. Tae Young-ho, the former North Korean diplomat, backs up what Jang Se-yul says about the many cyber warriors that the embassies don't even know about.
If there is a cyber unit in China, they are totally disconnected with the North Korean embassies. They are working like a spy. Some of them may use North Korean passports, but majority of them do not use North Korean passports. The passports of Latin American countries can be very easily bought. It is very difficult to track how many of them, where they are.
And for this reason, it's hard to get a handle on just how many North Korean hackers are actually working for the state. One defector we spoke to says only a few hundred. US and South Korean authorities say up to 7,000, mostly operating in China.
They may operate in the shadows, but I've known so many young North Korean men who could easily fit this profile, and it's heartbreaking. These are gifted, hardworking young men whose energies and talents could have been used in such a different way, but they seem to have very little or no choice but to follow the path that's laid out for them, to use their skills to rob and steal. We should mention here that North Korea's Ministry of Foreign Affairs denies Park Jin-hyuk's existence. They call him a non-existent entity and say, quote, "The act of cybercrimes mentioned by the Justice Department has nothing to do with us." And technically speaking, I suppose that could be true if the man we know as Park Jin-hyuk was using fake documents or details. And I think we should also note that the regime calls the allegations about human rights violations, such as forced labor, lies that they say are fabricated by the United States.
Okay, so you've got a group of hackers based overseas. They've been given access to the internet, which most people in North Korea don't have access to. They speak other languages. They're learning about other cultures. Some of them have fake identities, and even their own embassies and consulates don't even know what they're there or what they do. Doesn't this give those hackers the perfect scenario for defection? They could just take off.
Well, it's not that easy. For the most part, they don't get to hold on to those fake passports, and not having any papers makes it hard to defect. And the FBI cites witness testimony saying there was a government minder watching staff at the company where Park Jin-hyuk was working. This is common practice for North Koreans even when they're based abroad. I mean, this is a regime that has fine-tuned its methods of control over decades, inside and outside the country.
I suppose the other thing feeding into this is the fact that people like Park Jin-hyuk and his colleagues may take a bit of pride, a bit of satisfaction in their own achievements, even if they're criminal achievements. I mean, technically, he's a soldier, he's a cyber warrior, he's sworn to protect the fatherland.
It is said that the noblest title for a soldier is to be called a warrior. Think like a commander and act like a warrior. Such a sentence was famous among the people's armies, a quote of the Kims.
And for this reason, Jang Se-yul says we shouldn't feel too sorry for North Korea's hackers.
I think they are the most dangerous type of people. It is tough to assess my friends like that, but I still think they are really bad people. There is a saying that it's easier to wake someone who is sleeping than to wake someone who is pretending to sleep. Living abroad, they know how unfair the system is because they can search the internet. They know the reality. And yet, they support the system because they enjoy the greatest freedom within a dictatorship. It's like being the best victims.
It's easier to wake someone who is sleeping than to wake someone who is pretending to sleep. It's like they're living in a gilded cage, and they may know they're doing wrong, but it seems they can't resist the promise of security and status when they eventually return home to North Korea.
Those are the carrots, the incentives, but there's also one massive stick: the threat of their own families being punished in the most brutal way.
December 2013. So I woke up early one morning to a news alert from South Korea about the arrest of a high-ranking official in North Korea, Kim Jong-un's uncle, Jang Song-taek. He's a man many of us consider to be the second most powerful figure in North Korea. He was married to Kim Jong-un's aunt, and he was royalty in the North Korean political hierarchy, even if he wasn't a Kim by blood. Just to give you an idea of his importance, at Kim Jong-il's funeral, he walked just behind Kim Jong-un alongside the hearse, and my North Korean colleagues and I paid very close attention to who was standing where, because proximity to the leader always conveys importance in stature. And Jang was always just behind Kim Jong-un, literally peering over his shoulder. So I interpreted that to mean he was serving as a kind of regent, helping Kim Jong-un transition into this position of leadership in his late 20s.
And yet, just 2 years later, there are shocking images showing a defeated Jang Song-taek being dragged away in handcuffs during a party meeting. His face is bruised and his body's limp. He's put on trial for a string of alleged crimes ranging from corruption to womanizing and what the state media call capitalist living. A few days later, soldiers execute him with machine guns.
It was beyond shocking. We almost never hear about these executions, but this one was made very public, and it was designed to serve as a warning to all North Koreans with the message that no one, not even family members, would be safe if they posed a challenge to Kim Jong-un. We still don't know exactly why Kim Jong-un decided to have his uncle and mentor executed. Maybe Jang was getting too powerful, maybe he was corrupt, but suddenly everyone connected to him was at risk.
High-ranking defectors have told us that Jang's execution sparked a massive purge, not only of his associates, but also their families, including their children. No one was safe, not even those based abroad.
The incident was like #1 shocking event ever happened in North Korea since the country founded.
This is So-hyun Lee. You heard her older brother Hyun earlier describing the apartment packed with computer programmers. So-hyun also studied in Dalian, and she shared a dormitory room with a fellow North Korean who became her best friend.
She is a kind of model student, and like lots of people, they watch lots of movies outside of the country, but because she's such a good, loyal, and model student, she didn't even watch these Korean dramas. She just followed all the rules published by the country.
But now her law-abiding friend has got a problem, because her father worked with Jang Song-taek. So after Jang's execution, her dad is now guilty by association, and therefore under investigation. One day, shortly after Jang's death, So-hyun Lee and her friend are having lunch in the cafeteria, when a fellow North Korean who is head of their Dalian Youth League comes up to them.
He called my friend come to the dormitory. It was like during the lunchtime. And so we thought maybe he wants to deliver some message to you. Who knows? Let's find out. And we went over there, and I saw the state security agent with him, and he was kind of forcefully asking her to go up to the room and pack up her stuff because she needed to go immediately. I can tell my friend was nervous. I was not allowed to come into the room. It only took less than 5 minutes, and she came out with a backpack, and then she just said to me, I will keep in touch with you later.
And the friend is hustled off. There's nothing So-hyun can do but wait. When she finally hears back, it's an ominous message from her roommate who's texting from the toilet of a highway rest area, and she says, I don't think I'll be coming back. My cell phone is going to be turned off now.
So-hyun tries to call back, but the phone's already switched off.
We later found out that father was executed. I believe she was in political prison camp, but it is hard to tell whether she's alive or not. I mean, I lost other friends as well. What happened to one of the classmates, he was sent to political prison camp with his family. He suicided after 3 days because he can't bear with that. It was a huge, heartbroken moment at the time for me. I couldn't sleep, and it is big trauma for me.
And it's not just her friend who's in danger. So-hyun's own father had also just met with Yang, and now fears for his family's safety too. They make the tough decision to defect as well, landing first in South Korea before settling in the United States. Like the defection of the diplomat Tae Yong-ho, their decision's big news in South Korea because it's yet another defection from the elite class, the people who have intimate knowledge of how Pyongyang operates.
Defecting together as a family like this is unusual. The regime doesn't usually allow North Koreans to take their families with them when they're posted overseas. Only the most highly trusted are allowed to bring loved ones abroad. We sometimes say the family back home is like collateral to prevent North Koreans from defecting. Kim Jong-un seems particularly unnerved by defection. After all, the aunt who watched over him in Switzerland after his mother died has also defected and is now living in the United States. And since taking power, he's tightened regulations to prevent defections. And this, Hyun-Sung Lee says, means that North Koreans based abroad, like Park Jin-hyuk,
they worrying about their families. If he defected, and then the family might be subject to political prison camp, or if it's severe and then executions.
This is such a delicate issue. So defectors know their families may pay the price for their decision to flee. So you can imagine the pain of discussing the family they left behind. Remember Park Sang-hak from episode 2? He's the man who sends balloons into North Korea. He says that after he defected, his North Korean fiancé and other close relatives were executed. We were not able to confirm their deaths.
Gum-hyuk Kim, the young man who discovered McDonald's in Beijing and then later defected, he's got no way to contact his family back in North Korea now. So during a public speech, he took the opportunity to try and convey a message to them. He may have reached his freedom, he says.
But I had no idea what happened to my family. The North Korean regime will harass my family to try and silence me. Mom and Dad, I'm so sorry.
So just like any North Korean working overseas, Park Jin-hyuk would have been well aware of what defecting would mean for his family, especially when he's got someone special waiting back home. In September 2011, in an email found by the FBI, Park Jin-hyuk had written that he was hoping to marry his fiancée soon. He referred to her as a comrade, and he said he was looking for a way to return home permanently.
By this point, he would have been in his late 20s, so if he had a girlfriend around the same age, she would have been pretty anxious to marry before turning 30, because that is the norm in North Korea. But it would be a few years before he's allowed to return home.
And by February 2016, the weekend of the Bangladesh bank heist, online evidence suggests he probably was back in Pyongyang. But he left his email accounts open. And the FBI says there's online activity showing that other members of the Lazarus Group used those email addresses from China.
As the Bangladesh bank is trying to unravel the theft of millions of dollars, North Korea is in celebration mode. Every February in North Korea is dedicated to Kim Jong-il, the late father of Kim Jong-un. His February 16th birthday is called Day of the Shining Star, and it's one of North Korea's biggest holidays. And North Koreans work doubly, triply hard in hopes of getting extra rations or a gift box in February as a reward for their loyalty. Might be a bottle of soju liquor, might be apples, or even a new apartment in a high-rise complex.
Can't help wondering what Park Jin-hyuk would be up to at this time. He's back in North Korea now, so maybe he's out celebrating with his new wife, maybe laying flowers at a bronze monument to Kim Jong-il.
Maybe they have a young child with them and are living in a comfortable new apartment in the scientist quarter. And maybe they're able to splurge on foreign goods from Paradise Department Store with savings from his time working in China.
Life probably feels pretty good. The Lazarus Group's managed to pull off one of the most successful bank heists ever, and their families are economically secure and safe, at least for now. But their work's not done yet. Yes, the Lazarus Group may have managed to get tens of millions out of Bangladesh Bank, but those millions still need to somehow make their way to North Korea. Remember, this is a country economically isolated and under a severe sanctions regime.
The story of the Lazarus heist is far from over. They have the money, but now they have to launder the cash to cover their tracks, then get that money back to Pyongyang. For that, they'll need to tap into an extraordinary international network of criminal organizations, starting with a casino in the Philippines.
Tahu-tahu mereka datang membawa duit itu.
Suddenly, the money they are here to gamble appears, and it's all in cash. There were stacks and stacks of cash high like a mountain. And as the host, I'm only thinking, wow, this group is very rich, brilliant. But who are these people? How come they have so much money? We've never heard of them.
That's next time on The Lazarus Heist.
The Lazarus Heist is an original podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Jean Lee.
And I'm Jeff White. Our producer is Estelle Doyle, with original music from Magnus Fines and Lee Il-woo from the band Jambanai.
We would love to hear your feedback, so if wherever you get your podcast allows, please leave us a rating and a review.
And remember to subscribe as well so you don't miss any future episodes.
Do also spread the word on social media using the hashtag LazarusHeist. Our website is bbcworldservice.com/LazarusHeist.
We've been talking a lot about this character Park Jin-hyuk and his photo, and if you want to see it for yourself, you can. Check out the BBC World Service YouTube channel, where you can follow this series with images and subtitles. You can see pictures released by the FBI of Park on our website as well. Just search for the BBC World Service.
Thanks for listening.